All right, people, we're back. This is Chris Sussman, otherwise known as the Barbecue Buddha, and today we're gonna be smoking beef ribs, plate ribs to be exact. They're Wagyu plate ribs from Snake River Farms. They are the big boys just like this. 3 bones right down the center. The plate ribs are named plate ribs because it's from the plate primal section of the cow, which is where you get skirt steak. It's down close to the belly. It's really high in fat content. It's great. We're gonna turn these into what people often refer to them as brisket on a stick, because at the end of this cook, all that meat is gonna tighten up and it's gonna form a little blob of delicious meat, smoked meat on the end of the bone. That'll be like a little hunk of brisket on the end of that bone. So we're gonna start by trimming these up. I've got the big green egg set up outside to smoke. We're gonna do these at 250 degrees. So if you wanna see how I set the big green egg up for this cook, click the link below and you'll be able to see what I did. But essentially it's set up for indirect cooking. I'm using hickory wood for the smoke. It's at 250 degrees and we're gonna get these on for a little bit. So let's see how I trim these ribs up and get them ready for the big green egg. Come on. All right, so the biggest thing about plate ribs is the fat on top. Unlike brisket, where you want to leave about a 1/4 inch of the fat on top of the meat, for plate ribs you don't. We want to get rid of all this fat so we can bind the seasoning to the meat below. In addition, when you're cooking pork ribs, you usually take off the membrane off the back of the ribs. In beef ribs, for the case of beef ribs, we don't want to take the membrane off, because when the meat smokes, it's going to get very tender, and without that membrane, it won't stick to the ribs, which is where you get that cool brisket on a stick look at the end. So we're gonna leave the membrane on the ribs. We're gonna take all the fat off the top and expose all this meat. So let's just watch as I take this fat off. So here you go. You got a big bowl full of the scraps of the fat that I took off the top of the plate ribs. A little bit of extra beef in there. We can reserve that, set that to the side for some tallow. As I said before, you could see how the ribs are now exposed, the meat on the ribs, and you see all this really intense marbling and fat throughout. That's what's gonna give these plate ribs lots of flavor. It's towards the belly of the cow, tons and tons of fat, which means tons and tons of flavor. All right, so the very first thing I'm going to do is we're gonna lay down a slather for a binder. Basically, I'm gonna use hot sauce as a binder, and that's not gonna add really much, if any, of flavor to this, because it's gonna be smoking for a long time on the big green egg. It's just gonna act as a layer to hold down the seasoning and put on the ribs. For this cook, I'm using Heartbeat hot sauce, the Dark Side of the Grill Heartbeat hot sauce. It's an awesome hot sauce. You should check it out from my buddy Dark Side of the Grill. We're just gonna put a little squirt on the front, rub that all over. Now, the first thing I'm gonna do is just layer down some kosher salt. I like lots of salt on my plate ribs. You need salt for this beef to mix and get in to that fattiness to cut through. So we're gonna put a layer of diamond kosher salt on all sides of the rib, just a little sprinkle. Now, the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna apply a rub. As many of you know, I work with Dizzy Pig Seasonings. Cow Lick is my favorite beef rub. This is a deep, intense rub specifically designed for beef, thus the name, Cow Lick. Find it online, and I'm gonna put this on all sides of the beef. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have the beef plate ribs from Snake River Farms, seasoned up with Cow Lick from Dizzy Pig. Got the big green egg preheated to 250 degrees. Let's let these sit for a minute. I'm gonna go check on the big green egg. Then we're gonna get these onto the big green egg and let them smoke. And I'll walk you through the rest of the process until we get to the final stage where we have brisket on a stick. Stay tuned. All right, We're out here at the Big Green Egg. It's preheated to 250 degrees. I'm gonna link again, as I said earlier, the video, but I'm using the Big Green Egg Genius. This is a way that I can monitor the temperature remotely and also monitor the temperature of the meat remotely. So this monitors the pit temperature and it monitors the meat temperature, allowing me to control both with an app on my phone. But right now, we're gonna go ahead and get the beef plate ribs on my Big Green Egg. Place them right in the center. And then here's the meat probe. I'm gonna slide this in between the bones so we get a sense of the cook time and temperature. Close the Big Green Egg up. All right, it's been a couple of hours. You can see some of the dry spots starting to form on the outside of the beef plate ribs. The bones are starting to get exposed. The bark is looking really good. This side has enough moisture, but this is a little dry. So I just have a bottle, a spritz bottle with a little bit of water, and we're gonna hit the outside of the plate ribs. This helps with bark formation, smoke adhesion. If you wanna learn more about why you should be spritzing, read my first book, The 4 Fundamentals of Smoking, available on my website and on Amazon. But that's it. I'm gonna let these sit for another hour or so, check back at 3 hours, and then we're gonna wrap them. All right. All right, people, look, I'm gonna take this probe out of the plate ribs. They're at about 170 degrees. The bark is formed. It looks beautiful. I'm gonna go ahead and get these ribs out and put them in an aluminum pan and put in beef stock in order to help these finish. Placing the beef ribs in this aluminum pan. You can see right there, the bones are nice and exposed. The bark is beautiful. We're gonna pour in 1 can of this beef broth. And that's just gonna help with the wrap and add some steam and moisture to get these ribs nice and tender. So we'll just pour that in. Maybe pour just a little bit over top of the ribs themselves. Pour that all in the bottom of the pan. Place the meat probe back into the ribs. That way we will know when they measure over 200 degrees. I'm gonna wrap this with the probe back in to the aluminum pan. Now that's ready for the Big Green Egg. Place this aluminum pan, covered aluminum pan with the beef ribs and the beef stock back in the Big Green Egg. Close it. We'll let this run for a couple of hours until it measures 205 degrees, and we'll pull it off and slice them up. All right, so my remote probe is telling me it's 204 degrees, but I'm also going to use my grilling by feel techniques. We're gonna take a look at these ribs and see how they feel and how they look before we determine to pull them off the Big Green Egg. Now be careful, once you open up this aluminum foil, the steam is gonna escape and you don't wanna fry your face off. So let's do this very carefully. And this thing is like jelly. So we're gonna pull these ribs, place them right here onto the cutting board. We're gonna let these cool down for a little bit, rest for a little bit, and then I'm gonna come back, slice them up, and we're gonna get the Buddha bite. These ribs should be amazing. All right, so it's been about an hour. The ribs have just been resting on the countertop here. We're gonna get them out of the aluminum foil pan, put them on this cutting board, and we're gonna slice it open and see how they did. So let's take a look. The meat pulled back off this bone so much, this bone comes right out. So I'd say that's a clean bone pull, wouldn't you? All right, but let's see how we're looking on the inside. Slice right down here. This meat is so tender. Look at that. Look at all that fat, the marbling. You can see right here, smoke ring, all that pink color, nice and juicy. We'll get a little squeeze here. Look at all the juiciness. This is why they call it brisket on a stick. So you can smell, look at the bark, the beautiful color of the bark, smoke ring, the juiciness, all that intramuscular fat. I think you know what time it is, people. Look, if you like this video, if you like what you saw today, if you liked what you learned, please hit subscribe, give me a follow, send me a message, leave a comment. This is Chris Sussman, otherwise known as the Barbecue Buddha. These are my smoked Wagyu plate ribs, and here comes the Buddha bite.